Hello and welcome everybody to another special edition of the Cosmic History Codes with me, David, your co-host, and as always, the wonderful co-host, Stellar Nation's teacher, guide, and good friend, Leslie Shankman. How are you, Leslie?
I'm good, but it is Scorpio new moon or full moon coming up. So we definitely have those tentacle feelings going on.
Oh, yes, the tentacle feeling. So that's right. We're putting this show together with a special little preview for the full moon in Scorpio at 22 degrees of Scorpio, and I think 12 minutes, and having a look-see at the stars, the cosmology, we can say the fixed stars, although they do move, of course, that are getting activated in the stellar nations pathway, our archetypal stories of the universe behind this Scorpio full moon. So there's a lot of energy anyway in the astrology of this full moon. But it's in Scorpio, and that tells us a whole bunch of other stories in itself. So, Leslie, we're going to do our usual and
Yes.
get into what this is all about, because, of course, this is also, I think, in the constellation of serpents. So there's a lot of snaky stuff going on at the moment, in general, I think. And, of course, we're recording this on the day of a double serpent. So that's also interesting. So, without further ado, let's pull up the presentation that Leslie's put together and see what this all means, because this always gives us this extra layer, maybe from our soul background. What's coming up for us right now might be a little confusing because it might not be from this particular incarnation. But let's get into this and see what the stars have to tell us.
Okay. So we're going to talk about this Scorpio full moon as seen through the lens of cosmic history. Because yes, we do have four stars within orb of the moon, and they're going to give us messages. But you can't do Scorpio out of context because there's so many labyrinths and twists and turns in the underworld. So we're going to be presenting a bit of context here. Okay, with Scorpio, what we want to do is we can think about it in terms of the stellar nations. When we get to the cosmic human chapter, we're taken around the ecliptic and the different astrological ages, and we are shown that that's a whole development cycle of the human, and that each astrological age is a specific kind of initiation in this development cycle. So with Scorpio, it's actually an initiation into the trial of losing balance. So this is a period or a kind of energy which we really understand. It introduces a long and difficult inner pilgrimage inside the labyrinth of our own soul. Uh, it helps us come into experiencing higher, steadier, and rooted awareness of how to create and hold balance within our psyche and center, ultimately, but not always, it doesn't feel like that because we're on a major long initiation through quite a labyrinth. So that's the context of this full moon. And further, there's something that um, we have to realize in the galactic myths, the entire Scorpio constellation and that whole line of stars was brought to life by the revenge of the goddess. And this whole scorpionic matrix of stars is representational of the fall of the female serpent line. And this came about because if we won't go through all of cosmic history now, but basically we had the expulsion of the great felines, feminines, the galaxy tilted young. So many things happened with in the various galactic wars. The feminine was hugely despoiled, no place for the feminine. And finally, the goddess had a response. Her response was, I can give life and I can take it away. And this whole revenge was born, which is really what the bite or the sting of the scorpion is. And it's just interesting because the scorpion's considered a messenger from the underworld, attacks from an ambush. It's a cruel and evil assassin. It hides in the dark, can bring sudden death with its venom, and it's actually thought that if the world died in a nuclear attack, the only thing left would be cockroaches and scorpions. So, um, but we can take from the stellar nations that at the heart of the Scorpio constellation is the star Antares. And Antares, in fact, is a high angel star where all the galactic chronicles, the Akashic records of the Milky Way galaxy are held, where all these galactic myths are recorded in sound frequencies. And it's also a female serpent star. It's very much the home of the goddess. It's also a cosmic human star. But what Antares tells us is that beyond the shadows, eternity resides. And there's a beautiful and pure gate, which is Antares, which is the threshold of rebirth. And eternity always remembers everything that has existed. And so we start to get the feeling that against the backdrop of eternity, these happenings are cyclical. And while we're in them, they feel like that's it and nothing will ever change or life is just that. It's not true at all from the larger cosmic sense. We're going through all these cycles of experiencing and learning from them. But what we have here is the rage of the goddess who says, I've been so desecrated, I can take life as well. You know, don't take me, you're taking me for advantage of me or for granted, I guess I want to say. So there's also an interesting thought that comes up in the stellar nations, and it's kind of like a Freudian provocateur, let's say. And that has to do with the tension that we see between male and females. We see that in different aspects of creation. We see it certainly with the humans, we know being humans. Um, and we see it in the stellar nations between the male serpents and the female serpents. And the thinking goes on this that the source is androgynous, formless, faceless light. It's just pure spirit, the mind of the creator, who starts admitting itself with the word. It's an invisible seed, it's a kind of a frequency, and that's something that radiates out to be realized. So by coming into realization, it starts to coagulate, let's say, in in a more formed state. You know, we have all the different dimensions that it can form into. But the first thing that happens from the mind of God, the perfect universal oneness is polarized. Uh, it, the idea itself or the creator can't manifest, but the idea manifests into a masculine and feminine or a complementarity. And the idea fertilizes the mother or the goddess, which takes shape and manifests into reality. And then she's the agent that nourishes the world and her children. But in a way, the father can't participate. And what happens is when she has children, she forms a special dual union with her children, whereas she was conceived also to have a dual union with the masculine. So there's this idea that maybe there's a little bit of tension, even right at sort of the first level of creation, where there's a sort of perhaps a latent love jealousy in this inherent polarity, because now the feminine attention is going to the children. She's manifest, she's warm, loving, the children are manifest. But in contrast, the way of the father, the pure idea, the spirit, really can't be felt and touched in the same way. So there's a question. Is some of this dynamic under this, the fact that the father or the divine idea is shut out and doesn't have any real contact with its creatures? So just kind of keep that in mind as we go along. It's an underlying theme. So we've got four stars that are in orb of this Scorpio moon. Unakahai. I forgot to look up how to pronounce it. Do you know how to pronounce that, David?
Unekal High.
Yeah, I think I heard Bella do a good job. I meant to listen to Google tell me, but I didn't. Anyway, this is a 4-degree orb. It's got a big influence, but it's pretty much right on the moon. Then we've got from the Serpis, the Catapult Serpis constellation, which also Unalakleia is in. We have the Beta star, which we'll get into. We have a star from the Bear Christ community, Agena Hadar, and we have a star from the Arthropods that's actually being used correctly, meaning that it's in service to the original divine matrix. It's not a co-opted, stolen star.
After that introduction on the Scorpio energy or Scorpion energy, I think we need a little bit of positivity from the arthropod world on this
I
one.
know. I was so
I was like,
happy
oh
to
my
see
God.
that.
I mean, we both have big Scorpio placements where I'm like, wow, we didn't come out of that prologue too well. Only us and the cockroaches survive.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. We have something going for us there.
Right.
Actually, we do have to remember the creator of the universe is for us, not against us.
I know, I know. It's all for our own good, and we designed all of it, and we agreed to all of it. But we must never forget that.
Yeah, right. So I want to show us the constellation where we've got Unalakleia and the Beta Catapult, which is the eye of the snake. So this is a constellation that is literally a snake. It's got a head and a tail, but we see it in the Western world, or from Greek mythology. We see a fucus or Asclepius standing holding the snake, and it's our symbol of medicine. We have the snake entwined up with the man there. However, so if you can see, this is a little faint, but I have the wings and the snake that we normally see as the Greek representation of Asclepius. Cosmic history says, that's a projection. Actually, the goddess is on that snake. The goddess is riding that snake. And so let's put the goddess there instead of a fucus or Asclepius. And you can notice that her head, she's riding the snake, her head is actually right near the galactic center. It's receiving the vital force and bringing it down through the stake. There's a star there, Rosselhig. It's not involved today, but it's there. And then she's holding up the snake, and we've got the Unalakleia, which is the heart of the snake, and when we've got the eye of the snake. All right. Now, in many, many, many cultures, we actually have kind of the memory of this because we have the Sheila Nagig, we have the goddess who's many little statues in all kinds of cultures showing that there's a goddess with her vulva open. And what we learn from the stellar nations is the goddess figure is concealed by the serpent bearer constellation. And that goddess figure is the great mother goddess, and she gives birth to the worlds. The Sheila Nagig prominently exposes her vulva, the mystical gate of life, to give birth to the stellar flow of milk through her goddess being, which nurtures the stars, the planets, and the creatures on them in the Milky Way galaxy. So I also want to tell you, this is not part of, what's on the moon, but this is our scorpionic background that we kind of have to know. So here we see the standard map tells us, oh, here's a fucus. I mean, we can call it a fucus, but it's the goddess underneath. So it's not Asclepius. I'm not sure exactly what the difference is as far as the male aspect being represented. But these stars here actually are along the snake. And this is where we've got, these 3 stars is where we've got literally the yoni of the goddess on the snake. And this is very representational of the fact that the female serpent is a deep healer and knows that the source of all pain is separation and knows that our body is actually a vehicle, a technology, if you will, to run the vital force through, because that's what's happening. The goddess is running the vital force from the galactic center down into the created worlds to feed and nourish them. But it's our very bodies that do that, can do that, if we know how. And when we cross the gate of the heart with the proper understanding of how to run the spirit through the body, we come into unification again with the feeling of the creator. But we literally have 3 stars here, which represent a gate of pleasure, place of awakening desire, and also entering the cave so that we can go into this unification. So just to kind of reinforce, the serpent is the channel of the vital force. And the healing mystery of the goddess is that in her wisdom, she knows that all pain is created by the illusion of separation, as I mentioned, the illusion of having lost contact with a higher reality, with Mother and Father God. So what do we do with that? A little further thought about this and how we might start looking at the stars on the Scorpio moon in relation to this context. We're basically locked in the material world because we're feeling separate from creation. And I'm wondering if this Scorpio full moon is asking us to remember the secret that there is a pathway to the higher reality through the manifested world. And that the gateway, as I said, resides in our physical body and goes through the gate of the heart. And we can realize this healing gift of the female serpent aspect of creation, which teaches us the tantric mysteries of uniting spirit and matter to realize the state of oneness again. So I'm wondering if the Scorpio full moon is asking us to remember that we're not separate from creation, that we're asked to realize that our bodies are the manifested bloom of the Creator's seed idea, and that we can hold and run this idea. We can run the divine, the Father aspect of spirit through our bodies. And if we think about it, when we do this, we create a dual union of love. We manifest that within us, where the Father, so to speak, or the Spirit is not left out, not untouchable. In fact, that's where we enter the dynamic, creative love relationship where spirit abides and runs through our bodies, through our matter, and we're directed moment by moment in the flow of the union. I mean, that's what we're talking about if we move to a 5th dimensional new earth consciousness. And essentially, this is how we bring heaven to earth. Okay, so let's go look at the first star and see what its message might be to us. Unokahalai is, as I said, it's the heart of the serpent. It's everything that the serpent is about. You know, the serpent is about that vital force. It's about rebirth when it's necessary. But what we have here, and it's the healer. The female serpent is the healer. And this particular star is a pure healer archetype. With the rays of this star, what the frequencies that are held here, we can reestablish the harmony of the body and the soul. And then there's all kinds of tools that we know of that can be useful with this. There's crystals, plants, herbal essences, vibrational medicines, methods of healing touch. Now, this star is also analogous with the 8th house because it helps with crossing the gate of death. And it performs the healing task of delivering someone who's died, a disincarnated soul, or a dead soul aspect, because a lot of us are carrying around soul aspects that are just not alive anymore. But this star, this whole healing aspect, brings us through the agonies and the dark illusions of the astral plane. So there's there's two things going on here. There's healing by bringing harmony, but there's also, you can also say that sometimes going through the gates of death are healing, because we need to, especially if we're going to unify and let the spirit flow through us. That cannot happen if there's barriers. So we need to let pieces of ourselves die, and this is what the female serpent aspect can also help with. And this particular star is literally the heart of all this, and this is on the full moon. So I think it's kind of a guiding influence within this scorpionic context that we've presented. Okay. So what I was wondering as I went through this is, with this Scorpio new full moon, are we being asked to embody Unicalhi? Are we being asked to become the heart of the snake being, to become the channel of vital force that heals our body and psyche so that we can hold the flow of the divine idea, that spirit through our body? So can our bodies remember themselves as a kind of a feminine womb, as a container, as a birther of the vital force of spirit, the ever emitting ideas of the divine running through us? And again, I'm just repeating this, but I think it's something we need to hold inside. The Father God aspect, then, of creation has a place to be held, touched, recognized, not left out. And we become whole when these two aspects come together. And we bring, there's an alchemy. We bring spirit into matter we touch the divine in a way where we don't have to leave matter. We bring the two together. So going back to just remind us of the constellation, we've talked about Yunkahai, but then right above that, which is the heart, but right above that is the eye of the snake. So what do we hear from the eye of the snake? What's the message there? This is all about recognitions. And this ray, literally, this stellar ray, because remember, these stellar rays, we've said this in past shows, but we have aspects of our souls living there. They're living worlds. They're emitting light. They're emitting to us their frequencies, their energy patterns. They're a part of us. So this ray is bringing us the energy of recognition. And what it's asking us is to look at a person or a situation that has hurt us and to realize where the situation has brought us. What has it created? And it's realization that's the key to learning. And with the power of this stellar ray, we can see things clearly. We can expose or reveal the roots of a situation. And when we can do that, we can move on to be reborn from pain, from breakdowns, from disappointments. We can learn, we can become unstuck, we can get stronger and closer to our true selves. So I think we have two allies here with this moon. We have this very strong heart of the serpent, and we have the eye of recognitions. Now, next, I want to tell you about, I have this here because the next star is Agena Hadar. And this is part of the Centaurus constellation, or Chiron. And this star is the foot. Agena is it's a star on the shin of the leg of Chiron. And then his back leg comes around to Gamma Centauri. This kind of surrounds the Crew constellation. The Crew constellation is actually where the four divine principles of creation emanate out from. We've got divine love, divine law, divine will, and mercy. Acru, Becru, Gakru, and Delta Crucis. So I want you to see this because it becomes pertinent in the next part of the story. Once upon a time, or maybe even now, since time is all simultaneous. Um, the claws of the scorpion, which were later in cosmic history reset by Archangel Michael after this travesty I'm going to tell you about. They were into Libra to evolve something totally different. But in cosmic history, we have the claws of the scorpion, the Zubin Eshamali and the Zubin El Janubi, being recruiting stations for the male and female serpents. And remember, we're talking about the tension between them, and there's all kind of competition and jealousy. We're in Scorpio season, we're at this, in terms of cosmic history, we're at the utter low octave of the feminine revenge. So at one point, the lower octave of the fallen male serpent duped the lower octave of the female serpent. So from the Zubin Eshamali, went over to the Zubin Eshamali female and said, "Hey, look at over there, the bears, the teachers of the Christ consciousness. They're stealing all your students. Attack them, eliminating them." So it put one of those spells on them. When you're low octave and you bring a lot of energy of like, "Hey, do this, go, look at them." I mean, we know that energy in this world right now, right? Anyway, what happened is the feminine flame of revenge flared, and the female serpent took up the body of the scorpion to sting Chiron with the poison of her revenge. So that poison, that feeling of I have to get revenge, went into Chiron. It took him over in a kind of possession. You call this spirit possession. And he attacked the bear stellar soul family. And that's what happened, that attack. So let's call it metaphorically the poison arrow coming from the feminine, landed on the shin of Chiron into the agina. Now, let's assume that rattled Chiron. His back leg, Gamma Centauri, crashed into the Crew constellation. So Chiron basically trampled on all the principles of creation, and particularly landing, coming through that on Gakru, which is divine mercy. So the very like flow of grace and redemption that comes from the creator and creation was what was breached, and then the rest of it was breached, trampling the holiest holy sacred. So when Chiron came to, it was like that's in the stellar nations, they talk about the different levels of wounding of Chiron, but this is the deepest. And really, think about it. We've all been in this situation. This is our deepest wounding. Somehow we lose our mind. We're in a lower octave. We're prey to something. We're prey to some kind of outside force or some kind of substance that pushes us out of reason, and we do something, and there's a consequence.
You know what, Leslie, can I just jump in there because it's fascinating, all of this, all of the energy of poison and duplicity and fallen female serpent energies and people being possessed. And I think that perhaps as stuff starts to get released, even in the last couple of days, some big disclosures about prominent people in our society, it speaks of all of this energy of the trampling on the altar of Christ and many things. This even makes me think of some of the things that Templars who were going to get initiated in were asked, much to their surprise, to defecate on the altar of Christ. And that's how the dark lineages of some of the original esoteric, probably male serpent mystery schools fell. And I find it interesting that in this moment that we have this energy wanting to get released of what people do when they're under possession or black magic, which actually in our world is a lot more than most people realize.
Oh yeah. And but let's back up and go, wait a minute. We've seen Unukahi and the Eye of the Serpent, and we've been sort of told, wait a minute, we could bring ourselves, are we being asked to bring ourselves to a higher, purer state with those rays? And yet we don't get to that state. We don't get to that unification. As I said, if you hit all these shadows in the labyrinth, they have to
Right.
keep being cleared.
Yeah.
This is a major shadow
Yeah.
because what happens is This is the spiritual agony, the deep sense of guilt for denying the Christ concept. It's something that we've all done this, either by our own will and belief or due to pressure from an external influence. So, these are metaphorical stories, they're energy patterns. But this is probably active right now. We don't probably realize how unconscious it is, this deep guilt. And yet, so we're in this polarity of needing to clear of all of these shadowy things needing to come up, as we know. We have the promise of the clarity in the union in polarity with the utter shadow, right? I mean, it's always been like that, but we certainly see this agitated and, beyond acting out in the micro now, on the earth plane. So this is also because it's the penetrating point of the magic ocean of temptation. This is speaking of the forces and the thoughts which can evoke blind or frightful passions that come from pulling us by dragging swirls of fear, envy, jealousy. I think right now we have to see, examine ourselves. Is something at work here, some kind of fear or something? Do we have a weak point? Do we feel culpable or guilty? Do we feel ashamed about turning towards creation and surrendering and asking for mercy because we don't deserve it? Because, on some level, we know that we've done something and we just can't forgive ourselves. A lot of this may be unconscious, but it is a full moon. It's asking us to see. Now, this slide is just really, we're not going to go into this, but this is part of what's active too, is with this cosmic history, when the feminine duped the Christ consciousness like that, or, the duped Chiron, which duped, trampled on creation. For a long time, the lower octave feminine was, oh yeah, fine, that they deserved it. But in the maturation over time, aspects of ourselves or our feminine started to see, well, wait a minute, what really happened. And, may want to face their guilt and sort of work on this underlying shadow as we're speaking of, but it's been turned into such a knot, such a snarled knot, because it was taken up on the galactic scene, but in the earthly scene too, through the institutions of the church, where the feminine was just continually, beaten as not being good enough, the whole posture that she's put in, that Mary Magdalene was a whore. And so you've got this guilt and anger in the feminine aspect of ourselves that was duped, that was low octave in the first place because they had been so despoiled. This scorpionic um, venom is poison. It's a death hormone. We really have to examine that in ourselves. If, wanting some kind of revenge literally takes away the vital force of the body. But why I have this picture up here is we're all familiar with the fact that the feminine has gone through the ages, kind of going into the nunnery because they couldn't deal with it. They couldn't represent the goddess in her true form because it would be considered sexual, or they were just considered whores and sexual. But there's no like sacred ground here.
Mm.
So this is just something that's active. We can talk about this more. It's a little bit more to go. Um, and I want to say, what do we turn to? I mean, we literally have to turn to where Chiron trampled down right into mercy. We have to turn to asking for mercy and forgiveness because the crew constellation, those four divine principles are like an ecosystem that can hold us. Divine love is the impetus for mercy. Divine law kind of holds a structure and it's supported by love, so it's soft. We've got divine will that's saying, we're going to move towards the light, and we're going to set a destiny up for everyone where you can come into fullness. And you've got mercy literally as a river running through all of it. We call it a river of redemption because what the Creator says is you are never too fallen to be picked up again. All you have to do basically is say, you know what? I want to come back. And even if you haven't solved every single shadow in your being, if you start working with the creative force, the grace will start to come in. And this is actually maybe how we start this relationship. Maybe we're not going to have a tantric union sexually, or even, in a broader sense, the pulling the spirit through the body and realize our completeness, in one quantum flash. Maybe there's this like training ground. We start having a relationship with a creator. But I think we have to I think this full moon is telling us it's really time to start having a direct relationship with the creator. Realize this in our beings and bodies, and realize that there is so much we were given as humans that we're not using. Um, and then lastly, as you joked before, we have an arthropod star that is being used correctly. So what I mean by that, the stellar nations of the arthropods, this is the part of creation and it's a part of ourselves. Great Mother Spider has her web going through everything that's created. And what happens is the acts of creation are kind of let's say caught on camera by the web. Literally, that it's a kind of Akashic record. The Chamber of Mirrors comes from the Great Mother Spider web, because in life we see it's recorded what's happening. It's not nefarious. It's really the love of the Creator that says, I want to have the feedback on what creation is doing. I want a call and response relationship with creation. So I need to be fed through these lines of light, the actuality of what my creation is doing. So the way it works in the arthropod nation is the web is going through everything. Are being captured and moved along. There are certain stellar worlds where the records are packaged. There's very special technologies that the arthropods were given, and they're packaged and sent on to the creator so the creator can respond to creation. When there's a positive next to a arthropod star, it means that this star is working for the original divine matrix, for the grid that is holy and sacred, that's in direct communion with the creator. There are quite a number of arthropod stars. They'll have a negative next to them the negative means the fallen arthropods, those that want to sustain a false web, have co-opted that star. And they're packaging, they can still get information and they're packaging it in a different way. And they're not necessarily sending it to the creator. This is where we have this kind of energies thrown back at us. I mean, the EMFs are largely the mechanism of the false web, but there's a lot more, you know, because arthropods know how to work. They know how to work with energy in the sense that they know that they're taking the information about creation and how it's reacting, and they're bringing it up through lines to report it. But they know that creation comes from energy, or that it comes into manifestation. They kind of know both sides, unmanifest and manifest, which is great. It's a great strong side of ourselves. It's not so great when they're fallen and they want to use in the astral all these energies that they've captured to turn back on people for mind manipulation, for building miasms, great rivers of kind of sick energy that run through creation and influence people. Take us away from our center. Basically keep us from going beyond the fourth dimension. And that's very purposeful because the fallen can't go beyond the fourth dimension. I mean, they have memories of being higher. So they're trying to sustain a false matrix. So that's the constant recirculation of beings that they keep down so they can keep using others' energies. And actually, I'll just say, it's always a little danger when we start talking about this because then we really feel separation. Oh, they're terrible. And
Mm.
we don't want to be like that. We're all one, and that's a mirror to us. That's a mirror to us what it looks like when we don't go with the flow of the divine idea, and the cycles that are inherent in nature, when we don't take our initiations. When we take initiations, we essentially die to some parts of our self, but we're reborn to something else. That's the divine mind, constantly creating, constantly admitting ideas. We can be agents of it. We can have that flow of that go through us. When we're scared and we don't take the initiation, we lose our relationship with the divine matrix, the divine mind, with that spirit, the vital force running through us. And that's when we have to start living on the false grid and stealing energy from other things. So it's really just a mirror to us that shows us we need to be courageous. We need to trust the divine. We need to keep turning ourselves over to that. And then lastly, I just my sort of concluding thought as I was thinking about all this, when the knowing of the risen goddess, and I'm calling it the risen goddess, not the fallen female aspect, returns into our human body and psyche, we become the womb for the vital force of the divine idea. The vital force then flows through us in the mystery of dual union, birthing spirit into creation through our bodies and beings and bringing heaven to earth. And that would be my conclusion about this conversation. We can have our conversation if we want.
Well, thank you, Leslie, for that. I was quietly making a lot of notes as usual, and also just consulting across a few other aspects of this full moon that seem to catch my attention, which I'll just bring into the picture in a minute. But so if we just take the four stars, we have three essentially very positive stars that are supporting us and giving us the clues as to how to navigate the more difficult star and also some of the other aspects of this full moon. And what's also, I think, really important about this full moon is the context in which it's falling in this way spell of the yellow magnetic sun, and that this full moon is
Right.
happening on the day of manifestation of whatever it is the sun is working with us on, but also on the glyph of the red planetary moon. So we've got sun, moon, planetary energy, all on the same day, masculine, feminine, lunar, solar, yin, yang, internal, external. It's the big topic right now that seems to be in the ethers everywhere. And I think that this story that you shared with us through the stars, as always, for me, they're always stories. They're a gestalt of something that is activating through this, in this case, through the moon in Scorpio. And of course, this is a very scorpionic moment that we're in. That's why we have the sign of Scorpio in the zodiac to assist us through the murkier aspects of the, we can say, fallen psyche of our off-planet ancestors and how they were given to us to work through. We're a bit like the problem solvers, right? It's like, okay, what are these various stellar families, these nations couldn't really agree amongst themselves, so they decided to give us their DNA and see if we could work it
No,
out
but
for
no,
them.
don't say that because we are them.
Well,
It's not
I
like
know, it's the same thing, I know, but it's
no, we're cosmic humans. Our lapse is we threw them all out. We felt superior. We don't want these things inside of us. They didn't have a home. They didn't have a container. They went rampant. It's really our superiority and it's our healing now to contain everything, to contain all these parts of ourselves.
right, exactly.
And
So that's
perhaps that is our teaching of the flow of spirit, because there's so many ways that creation speaks to us. And it gave us these 13 incredible light seals for us to be chalices of. And we threw it out with our human superiority. That's our lapse as cosmic humans.
Well, as you've said before, it's like it's the chicken and the egg. It's like there's no end and there's no beginning because it all happens simultaneously, which is definitely a headbender, even with deep meditations with plants. But where I was going with that, though, Leslie, was basically we have this more challenging star of Hadar, which speaks to me of a lot of the stuff that is bubbling up from the entertainment industry, from the misuse of women and children, all of those things that we know have been going on in the shadows, in the underworld, beyond sight, but have been hugely detrimental to, of course, women in general, but most of us as humans perhaps have been affected by some of this. And in many ways, that fallen, wounded aspect of the feminine is actually a large part of what is coming to the surface. Sex workers, prostitution, people being taken and used against their will, all kinds of things that are simply not correct by universal law, but have been allowed to perpetuate. And what I see coming up is the blame game. And it doesn't just relate to this
Mhm.
specifically, it relates to journalism, politics, medications, education, woke agendas, all kinds of things that are all on the inverted, subversive end of the spectrum. They kind of are reductionist rather than expansionist in terms of revolution. They keep us stuck in these places. It all needs to be reviewed. And what I also see is that in the energy of Scorpio, which can be a little dangerous and volatile sometimes, it's easy for that to be black and white. You did this to me and it's your fault, and there's going to be divine revenge and retribution because that's my right, because you did this to me. And I can see that there could be many hundreds of millions of people who might be entering into that space soon, which is why we need to have this heart and this vision to be able to rise above that and to not fall prey to the lower notes of the scorpion serpent.
Yeah, and we have to be aware that's part of our energetic matrix and our history, and we have to say no to it because we have
Yeah.
another choice. We have to know we have a choice of the divine. And actually, what you just said, all that blame game and projection is exactly part of the redemption cycles. It's a developmental cycle. When we realize that something's wrong and don't want to accept responsibility, one of our first actions is to blame. But the problem with that is you literally create an entity that doesn't want to die because it becomes part of your persona. And right now, actually, according to the stellar nations, we are in the heat of the redemption cycles. Every single stellar nation aspect of ourselves is like popcorn, asking for the um, the fallen aspect of itself to be realized and risen. Um, so that's what we're seeing on the out. And I don't know what we can do in terms of, I mean, maybe if we kind of have strength to ask for mercy and think beyond the polarities, maybe we just need to go into like living but constant praying on some level, constant compassion and praying to try to infuse the collective waters with, I don't know, some kind of wake up.
Well, I mean, so yeah, I agree. And I think personally, the best way to navigate through all of this is to meditate from a non-dual perspective and understand that it's all just part of the great game that we're in, because that is the ultimate, in my opinion, antidote to some of these more perplexing questions. Because there are two sides to this also. There are the victims and there are the perpetrators. And the victims have a right to feel that they have righteous justice, and the perpetrators, when they really question some of the things that maybe they've done, they're going to ask themselves, why did I do that? And why did I go out on the soapbox and get other people to do it and do all of this kind of ripple effect? So both of those groups of people are feeling perhaps that they were forced into doing something against their will, which actually simply cannot be true because there's a whole other group of people that didn't participate. So that literally blows open. I was forced to do this. Somebody made me do this. It's like, not really. And you said it yourself, what's our weak point? Whilst people are still in denial that somebody else made me do this, somebody else did this to me, they're going to be caught in that place because ultimately, why did you let somebody do that? Why did you not stand up for your ethics and principles and say, I don't think that this sounds like a good idea, so I'm not going to stick that in somebody. I'm going to go away and do due diligence before I commit to something karmically that might not be so great for me personally. I didn't see a great deal of that going on. And I think that as this full moon approaches, Leslie, all of that is going to be in the collective awareness because it has to be at some point. We simply cannot move forwards while we have all of these big shadows
No,
that are not being discussed at the collective level. And uncomfortable as that even is to share on this video, because it might trigger some people. If we just sit for even 10 minutes of meditation and think about this from a clean, clear perspective, it's logical. And if we don't work with this energy at a heart level and call in the heart of the scorpion from Antares and say, look, we understand this big mess, lots of poisons, toxins, misuse of power, misuse of surveillance. Of course, the North Node is being conjuncted by Zeta Reticuli on this full moon. The Uranus Cazimi that happens
oh,
just
I
a few.
know, it's a mess. I mean,
It's a,
we could go into, we
oh, I
could
know,
go into,
and that's not the
yeah,
scope of today's show, but I just double checked the Uranus Cazimi, of course, is on Algol. So, when we put those pieces
yeah,
together,
which is,
we can see that the bigger picture that we're up against is like it's the bringing of the demonic presence to the surface, how it's been used with dodgy surveillance, for blackmail and all of these things. And it's like, at what point do we say, hey, I understand why somebody did that because they had a gun to their head and they were being blackmailed by a very typically three-letter agency or something like that, who knows? But at the same time, it's like, well, there are always other choices and you allowed yourself to fall. And it's like, it's a very, very difficult conundrum to take sides in. And so you shouldn't. I'm just like, I think the easiest thing here is to say that if I go this way, it doesn't look so great. And if I go that way, it doesn't look so great. So maybe I just need to find the Buddhist point in the middle, which is balance, which on the day that we're
or maybe you
recording,
need to,
yeah, go
yeah,
on.
or maybe you need to say, recognize even what we see in these stories, just the snarl, just the mess, and turn towards this
Right.
creative, the divine, and say, help me. Literally, I think we need to start understanding that we have to call on something else. And it's there because that's the relationship we're going to be forming, hopefully. And there's a
Right.
solution or something there that we can't even necessarily know. I think that's the breaking of us. The breaking of us is, how much broken do you have to be to finally say,
Enough.
I can't do it. Help me, you know? Um,
Right, I think that's very much in the mix. And, as you were describing Unakal High, which I think is really the redemption point here, if we can get into that space of the heart of the snake, the heart of the pure healer, as you were talking about the energy, the spirit of the Elder Mother was very much in my awareness. It's like, this is the energy of Elder. This is the great wise healer, the psychopomp, she who knows all ends. This is the epitome of wise feminine healing, is for me, is Elder. But then we also have this ability to see better, the eye of the serpent, the third eye, the psychic ability of the Scorpio is probably the best in the zodiac. It's meant to be, it's part of its gifts, so that it can see into the energy realms of a person who needs healing. So, it looks like it's this that needs to be healed. That's a gift, and it's meant to be a gift of healing. So we need the vision to see what needs to be healed here. Oh my God, division, polarity, abuse of power. It's almost ubiquitous. It doesn't matter where you look, you only have to look a little bit and you'll see it. Our whole society was constructed on that. So, okay, we can see the problem. Now, what do? We need to go into that place of the heart of the healer from a non-dual, non-polarized, non-divided place and say, I'm here for healing for everybody, no matter where you are on your redemption path, no matter how far you fell, no matter how much, you're still on the way back. We're here in a non-judgmental way for healing. Does that make sense, Leslie? That's my
oh
understanding.
yeah, no, it all makes sense. It really makes sense. It's just, it's about making it happen. You know what I mean?
Yes. So
And
that's maybe
that's
the
an
tricky part
individual
of this.
call. I think we have to take individual responsibility. Well, we can look at these big patterns. We can have this talk and hopefully get a little bit like
Right.
grounded or centered in something like, that gives us a direction, because we realize, wow, this is bigger than that political story or this scene over in
Right.
that
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
This is,
Well, it does, as we've talked about before. I mean, the fractal snapshot we have of our reality now is just a loop of other realities that have just played out over and over again. So we can look back 200 years, 400, 2000, 10,000, and we're going to see much the same stories playing out because they haven't got resolved. And that's the whole point. We keep going through them until we finally resolve them. We're at the point now, the culmination point is many of us are feeling that, hey, all of this stuff behind is kind of old and tired. And I think I've learned everything I need to learn from that. Because I'm not experiencing those things anymore. Those things that were coming up for me and challenging me are no longer doing that. And perhaps that's maybe just where some of the vanguard of us are in this moment in the spiritual context. But there's a massive chunk of beings that aren't. And they're about to enter into Scorpio world through this full moon and perhaps see things for the first time. And that's where I see this interesting dance between the light of the sun coming into us and illuminating our inner world so that we can see more of the non-physical. But as we see more of the non-physical, we're going to see all those things that people didn't want to see. The Scorpio
It
world.
might be
Halloween,
horrifying.
right?
I don't know. I don't know. At this point, it's bigger than a little bit bigger than our human capacity to, how they say you can't make a solution from the level of the problem. I don't even know. I think we have to move into heart, compassion, all the fifth dimensional, all the kind of Christ consciousness levels and try to hold them. We need to reclaim the, the crew constellation, the divine principles of creation. Like, I want to live there. Like, put out prayers.
Well, as you say that, and we are about to wrap up on this one for today, but just you put something into my awareness, maybe, Leslie, that is part of this picture, is that we have Black Moon Lilith sat in the beginning of the crew constellation, perhaps entering into the sacred temple of the Christ to look at some of the wounding of the feminine. Do you have a thought on that? I know we didn't cover it in the stars, but I feel like it's part of the energy of this Scorpio full moon because it's also in Scorpio, of course, 5 degrees.
And which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about Black Moon Lilith hitting the first of the two stars in Scorpio that are part of the crew
Oh,
concept.
yeah. Well, that could take Black Moon Lilith. It has a little more specific meaning in the cosmic history context. Astrology kind of tends to look at it. It's got different definitions, but it's that raging woman. It's the scorpion, it's the stinging, it's the revenge. She's awful, she's demonic, but it's the underworld of our underworld, and it comes from the deepest, deepest, deepest hurt. And it's a reaction to that hurt that part of our being that may forget but knows that that how sanctified, that the creator didn't make us to be like this. And it comes very specifically, Black Moon Lilith is very specific reaction in the cosmic history to what happened with the great felines, the huge betrayal, when basically they were innocently trying to create a democratic Aquarian type of society, but they were too immature. They were independent of themselves. They didn't realize what it took to be together. They didn't realize that the galaxy had really mean, power-hungry dragons. They were used in affairs. They were betrayed. Most of their nation was pushed out of the galaxy, pushing the feminine out. So there's the expulsion. And then after that, when on Algol, we have the angel and the dragon merging, creating a satanic force being so like over sexualized and so desperate to have a higher consciousness that they cast their tantric nets down to the Pleiadian daughters of Electra, who were just learning the female serpent tantric energies, and who were duped because the beauty of the angel came in with the power of the dragon, and they thought, oh my God, we're being graced with these wonderful men to learn the tantric mysteries with. No, they were being taken, co-opted. They were locked down so that their light bodies could be used as vehicles to go to the higher dimensions, since these lower beings couldn't anymore. And this is a whole Atlantean history that we're working out, because this is really big during Atlantean times on the Earth, where the light bodies of women had to be used. And in those light bodies, all the gates to the union have been mined and locked up. So we've got ourselves as souls who want, maybe in our heart, this is the rage of Lilith actually, want in our heart to get back there. And we literally are mined at every point where they used to take us through as the feminine light body, but left kind of seals there, so you can't do it on your own. You can't access yourself anymore. You're like half dead souls. They've been doing a lot of work with this in Hungary, the healing of the light body in this regard. with the feminine wounding of Electra, and this is a lot of this stuff is Atlantean, hundreds of thousands of years of Atlantean stuff that really didn't come back into our consciousness till about 100 years ago. And that's 100 years ago when the collective cried out and said, I mean, when they first started getting the Atlantean memories, because they were literally suppressed, I think on purpose, but when they were meant to come back up, all we could see as a collective is a destructive timeline. But there was a kind of a cry out for wanting an ascension timeline. So we've been under, our collective and the forces have been working on this since 1887. It was grounded in 1987 when we managed to do the harmonic convergence. We managed to come together and ask for harmony and peace. We've had the ascension and the apocalypse running side by side ever since. It's gotten more and more intense. We are alive to the photon belt now fully. All the information is pouring in. It's all simultaneously. We don't have any organizing systems for it. That's why I like the Stellar Nations. It gives us an organizing system for all this massive light that's coming in. Gives us a
Right.
sense of coherency. You've done that really well, David, because you've understood each nation as like an inner council and you work with them.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, in
that-
that regard, anyone who's watching this, I would love to just share for a few minutes that by working with the material, working with Leslie, but working mostly inwards, and particularly with the help of dandelion and other plants too. But I understood that I could talk to those aspects of myself, my sixth, seventh, eighth, fifth dimensional self that exists on these stars, by communicating with a part of my DNA that's actually represented by. And because our DNA is all of these different hybrids of all of these nations, once you manage to make contact with that part of yourself, which does, in my case, involve having to help them with their wounding, because in many cases, some of those beings, I had rejected them as part of myself, so they were actually outside of myself, and I had to welcome them back in. And with the help of the stellar nations, and also through tracking my own life, because it's all simultaneous, I can see where the wounding had happened to my cat self, my dragon self, because it had already played out in my life. All I had to do was correlate the two backwards and say, this is just a loop that comes from this original wounding point in the universe and has showed up here again because my cat self is still suffering from those wounding. And it's interesting you mentioned Electra because, we have this Uranus Cazimi that's coming up. And it feels to me, Leslie, and I know this is not the scope of today's show, but this full moon in Scorpio is actually setting up a lot of what I think is then going to play out on the Uranus Cazimi. Because that Uranus Cazimi triggers both Algol and Electra, which is very much part of the story that we've just been talking about. And I'm like, well, we have all of these fallen angels and demonic forces and the misuse of sex and power and women and how they've been treated and how they've allowed themselves to be treated. And all of these things all need resolution. But most of all, we need to be in our heart so that the deep darkness of the underworld can be brought up finally for release and purging. And it's going to be
right.
tough. And we all have to be strong. But those of us who have the stomach for this, which is often Scorpios, because we're little that way anyway, need to be able to hold space and say, this is going to be unpleasant for a few days, hopefully not too much longer. But whilst the sun is coming, it's literally forcing this crap up to the surface because it has to.
Right.
And
Yeah. And I know, I realize I'm kind of yelling, but I feel like this is the moon. This is my Scorpio
yeah,
moon.
I know exactly. Of course, Leslie has a Scorpio moon, and I've got like 101 planets and asteroids, and God knows everything else in Scorpio to deal with. But funnily enough, this full moon doesn't hit any of that stuff. So I'm like, I'm just dealing with
You're
Black Moon
lucky.
Lilith right now on my sun. That's why I was asking that question. It's like, I feel like I need to get
Yeah,
a
I'm
little
kind
bit
of
more.
screaming over here, but it's like just a little personal. Um,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
but so here going to Algol, this is important. The Algol has a fourth dimensional expression and a sixth, frozen light like a higher light. It was designed as a place of polarity so that the realization would come that redemption could be asked for, and then that would be learned in creation, and creation would turn over to the next level. So Algol is not, I mean, we've got certain stars where the divine plan is in the center as the Holy Spirit in every created body. Algol has one divine plan, Earth has another, we're the planet of redemption. Algol is meant to realize redemption between these polarities. Algol's like it's really important. It's a dead weight on this
right.
galactic rearrangement that we were at the end of three different huge cycles, like to take up a new spiral arm. This is a big galactic consequence, not just Earth consequence. So a lot's happening in the balance here. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what? I will say, so there's a whole Scorpio chart, and the star right where you're lifted back up to the goddess in total forgiveness and you're returning to the center of eternity. Um, the star right before that is We, WEI. It's also it's got two different dimensional expressions. In the fourth dimension, it's the absolute um, like just fallen female serpent, the misuse of, her powers in black magic and impotenizing the man, making him small, whatever, misusing herself for the goddess.
Hmm. Hmm.
But in the sixth dimensional aspect of it, which is right before you get lifted to Antares, it's acceptance, which is one of the seeds of Christ consciousness. And like you said, you lift yourself above the polarities. So everything's simultaneous, even on certain stellar worlds, right? It's kind of a matter, where do we dial in, right? We have a
Right.
choice.
We do have a choice, and I think as we come to the end of this one, maybe we'll park some of this up for a little look-see at the Uranus Cazimi if me and Leslie can find the time and the energy and enthusiasm to do that. But I think it is important because you said something there, which is perhaps my final thought, that if Algol is a dead weight, which we are feeling as a burden, because it's a bit like the ball and chain, and it's in the underworld of the underworld, and some of us might have gone down and released our own personal ball and chains, but the collective ball and chain is still somewhat there. And until we either find the key and unlock that, or we pull the ball and chain up and then collapse the underworld completely, which energetically has already happened. That happened back with the Escher and Pluto Cazimis, but we're still seeing the uplift effect of the energy as it rises up for release. It's almost a bit like it rising up through the energy body of us. It's also rising up from the energy body of Mother Earth, from the underworld where it was hidden into the light, which is what I think that this sun is setting up with us. And then perhaps the Uranus Cazimi could be the point where that burden is finally released. I don't know. I'm not calling that in necessarily, but I'm feeling that this dead weight from Algol is something that wants to be transmuted, and the energy of Scorpio is the perfect time to do it.
Let's also look at Algol as it is a dragon star. It's the eighth initiation of the dragon. And the dragon is the warrior standing up for divine will.
Mm.
Uh, and the eighth initiation is the warrior has to know when it's correct to cut something out of creation that doesn't serve creation. It's a huge responsibility. But
Wow.
it there I mean there's a very high, that's part of the virtuous aspect of Algol. And I think it speaks to us about our choices and what we cut out of uh, our own lives or being. I mean, actually or metaphorically, even with our just how we change our thoughts. Um,
Well, I mean, just at a very simple term, we could think about that. Do we cut toxicity and density out of our life? Does it mean having to make choices that let go of stuff? Maybe we've had a long friendship or partnership or a job or something that we've got so used to we don't really know anything else. But perhaps at the same time, there's a toxic feed that's coming in from that. Maybe differences of energy fields, of timelines, of consciousness, things that maybe 10 years ago weren't so important. Suddenly, in fact, this has come up a lot in the last week or so. Many people saying they're finding it very difficult to be around people who are not on the same frequency as them anymore. Literally, it sort of pulls them back down into a lower frequency. Well, which is,
yeah, but that's an initiation then. You know
I
what?
know.
You get pulled back. I'm sorry. I mean, notice it, but then make your choice. I mean, that's Algol. Like, pull the
Exactly.
sword out and say, I'm standing up for this.
Exactly. That's my
You know,
point, Leslie. That's what I'm trying to say is that we're being
yeah.
forced to make those choices and say, okay, it's nothing personal, but the frequency of this situation or this person is not matching my own, and I'm going to have to cut that density out. So that was exactly the point that I was making. So
Yeah, and maybe it doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe you just walk
no,
away in a moment and you leave it with a black
no.
eye. We could go on about it,
Well, I
but
think that the energy of drama that wanted to unfold in the planet was a projection predominantly from the lower frequencies that thrive on drama, and we're so programmed to something having to be dramatic for it to be beneficial somehow that that doesn't seem to be happening. And I think that it's throwing many people that we haven't had more dramatic world events. But at the same time, with all of the illusory nature of Zeta Reticuli, how would you even know if it was true? So, we've got all of these incredibly mind-bending paradoxes, which most people are knee-deep in at the moment, trying to make sense of. And at the end of the day, we still have to come back to the actual energetic process that's underway, which is redemption, surrender, release, redemption, and ascension. And that isn't
Yeah.
necessarily something that's being told to us on the 24-hour news circuit from the TV. So,
No.
inconvenient as that might be, because we're programmed to take our world affairs from the things that are presented to us. But the truth is, when I look in the astral world, they often really now do not really match the incoherency of the narrative being presented. And at some point, that
Yeah.
also has to be let go of. That burden of propaganda and false ideals and false stories also needs to be dissolved. So I don't know, Leslie, as we come to the end of this deep dive into this Scorpio full moon, I hope everybody has found that useful. I always love doing these shows with you, and I know that our audience love them too. And maybe we will have a look at the Uranus Kazemi piece. But final thought from your side, anything you wish to add as a sort of a wraparound to this full moon, or have we said it all already?
I think I probably said it. I
Well,
probably yelled it.
well, for those of you out there watching this who have strong Scorpio placements, which I think is probably the majority of our tribe and our audience, we're with you in your corner. We know how tough this can be, but also we came in with these coordinates as these Scorpionic beings to assist here in the transformation and have to have the guts to maybe look into the darker spaces, and not all humans are able to do, and say, it's okay, I can look at that. It doesn't bother me. I'm going to put light into that shadow. I'm going to assist in its transformation. And so the best place to start is here with ourselves. And that's my invitation to everybody.
That's
Use
all you
this
can do.
opportunity.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's your piece of real estate. You want to bring it
right.
to Earth, this is your real estate.
Right. And you want your real estate to look, clean and tidy and nice and welcoming
Yeah,
and all of those things. And we have the dual benefit of lunar and solar energy here. So let's really work with all of that for manifestation on this manifestation full moon day with those energies for whatever it is that's going to set up the rest of our lives moving forwards, but also to be brave enough to have the courage of the dragon and cat warriors and say, hey, I'm ready to finish off this mission. I'm ready to bring everything to a place of culmination and let go of those dead weights and things that no longer serve me. And in doing so, I open myself to receive the truth of who I truly am. And I think
right,
that is everything that we can ask for. So that's my
right.
invitation.
And remember, there's a creator force, and we
Right.
can ask,
We are
and
the
maybe
creative
maybe it
force.
has a better idea than we do.
Always. Somebody upstairs always has a better idea than David. That much I'm pretty certain of.
All right.
At least a better
Well,
thought
thank
out
you
one,
for this,
maybe.
and
Yeah.
thank you for whoever listened. And yes, onward.
Bless you one and all. In Lakesh, I am another you, and we'll see you all again very soon for another transmission here on the Solar Gateway. Thank you, Leslie. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.